But I suspect most people in the room know a little bit about you and some of the investments and the success you've had. So, I'd love to touch on a few
I'm
things
sort of hoping they don't know me too well.
Well, they still came knowing you're on the agenda, so I think we're at least good. So, today we're talking about the future of work. As you can see, the fourth industrial revolution, things that are changing. You have a unique vantage point in the venture community, seeing investments you've done over the decades that have worked, that haven't worked, that have pivoted to the way the world has gone, and deals you're looking at today. Can you give us some insight on the startups you're funding or that are fundable in your eyes and how they're different today from those of maybe 10 years ago?
Boy, you hit a couple of things there. One is, reminds me of, when you said future of work, it reminds me of something my son told me. And he said, all your jobs are going to be taken over by AI. Everybody's job. And then the next natural thought is, what then? And it's like, hey, you've spent all your days in the fields, digging dirt, and then the hoe gets invented, and so you can do it standing up. Well, I think that same kind of thing is going to happen. Artificial intelligence is going to do all the mundane tasks, and then we can rise to another level as humans. And I think that's going to be really exciting. The things that have changed since we got started, a lot has changed. I used to knock on all the doors that said something software, hey, you guys looking for money? But now it's very different. We get tens of thousands of opportunities in a year, and we're only going to do about 20 of them. And so it gets very, we play a lot of defense now. We used to play a lot of offense.
So what's catching your eye when you're reviewing that many deals?
But now getting into technologies, the internet changed communications, information, gaming, entertainment, media, changed some big industries. But now with Bitcoin, the blockchain, smart contracts, and artificial intelligence, we are going to see the transformation of industries that are in the trillions of dollars, bigger than any big change we've ever had. So these are such amazing sea changes. They're going to not just change banking, which is sort of the obvious one, or commerce, or anything else tied to money. But it will also potentially change insurance, because smart contracts can create really interesting model for insurance, where right now you pay your premiums every month or whatever, pay, and then you make a claim, and you start fighting with your insurance company for 6 months before they send you a check. Well, if you build in a smart contract, you're going to get that back. And what is government but a big insurance program? And so government's going to change in a big way too. And Bitcoin showed us that a company can do something called decentralize, so that it can be outside of central control. And what that means is that you can pay people across borders. A lot of interesting things that you can do. But if you take decentralization as the theme for changing the world going forward, then our geographic borders, the speaker just before us was talking about the war between China and the US. I'm kind of looking and I'm saying, well, why do we even have that border? Because as businesses were global, we always, anybody who's not is sort of missing a big part of the world. We as humans have always been very tribal, but now it's starting to feel like us is them. It's not us versus them or us and them, it's us is them. We all are a part of the same flying orb flying through space, and we're starting to notice that. And tribes were set up kind of so that people could control, feel secure, feel safe in their little environment. Well, now you're pretty safe all around the world, except if you watch the news, you
On
always
safari
feel
in
like
Africa,
you're not.
perhaps, yeah.
But you're also benefiting from connections with people around the world. So I think about this. This is, people ask me about Bitcoin. If I'm in Sudan, and I'm a pretty wealthy guy, and I'm in Sudan, and all I have is Sudanese money, then the Sudan government comes in with guns, and they force me out of the country, and then I arrive, and I'm in Greece, and I'm a refugee, and I have nothing, because they don't take Sudanese money in Greece. Well, okay, so I have to start over. But I've built that great life in Sudan. Now, if I had put a third of my money into Bitcoin, I'd just start right over in Greece for my new life with the Bitcoin, and I could just
I know
pull
you're a
it right
huge
down.
advocate of Bitcoin. I know you have a big
Absolutely.
investment in this space. How do you feel that's going to play into the future of work? So when you have distributed workers all over the world, and you're having to go through the SWIFT system, send US dollars, lose money in translation, let alone the repatriation of money like you see in the Philippines or others where it's the first or second level of GDP.
Yeah.
Do you see governments transforming, and we'll talk about your California initiative in a second, do you see governments bending to that, or do you just see them causing restrictions and this continuing to be kind of the dark side?
So I have this vision of the future where I am able to raise money in Bitcoin. I invest it in Bitcoin. Those companies pay their employees and suppliers in Bitcoin. And when they go public or become merged out or whatever, that money then immediately goes to my investors through a waterfall into Bitcoin wallets. So with micropayments all the way, every time something happens, a micropayment goes into that
And
wallet.
taxation happens as a layer right there?
So here's, but think about that. The accountant can spend a lot more of their time helping and advising and thinking than they're doing counting the money or auditing, because the blockchain keeps a perfect record already. And the lawyer can give you much better, more interesting advice, because the contract is already built in as a smart contract. So long term, I think this is where we're all headed, because it's just better and easier and faster and cheaper.
So if you're running a $100 million company in Brazil or in Los Angeles or somewhere else around the world, how does this impact you? How can you lever it to your advantage? What should they be thinking about as people head back to their businesses?
Well, except Bitcoin probably would be a good start. But let me answer the question from before, which was about how do governments respond. It's very interesting, because I've watched this in industry for years, where a new entrant comes in, a new startup comes into an industry, and then what does the status quo do? The big companies always sort of line up and try to protect. So when Bitcoin came into the world, the banks lined up, the big banks lined up and said, you can't even use a credit card to buy Bitcoin. We're not going to let you do, we're going to make sure that, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Right. This is really important for you to just stay with us, because we like controlling all your money. Well, all of a sudden, that goes away, and eventually they come around. But the small banks were kind of a little bit more like, I might take Bitcoin. Hey, I'm kind of thinking about it. Same thing's happening with countries. The big countries, China mostly, are terrified of something that allows the world to be free, and they don't get their control. The Chinese president. China was so awesome for so long, and now they're clamping everything down, and I think their economy is going to go flat, because they've taken away all the freedoms, and all those great entrepreneurs who are doing all those great things are going to either leave or be subverted somehow. Like Binance. Binance was in China. They built a $10 billion company trading crypto, and the Chinese government says, hey, what you're doing here is illegal. They said, what? This is news to me. And they said, well, then we're going to have to leave. So they went to Singapore. Singapore started to get heavy-handed, and they went to Malta. And Malta said, $10 billion company, you bet, come on in. I think you're going to see governments having to compete for you and make sure they do. I mean, you guys are all CEOs of big, successful businesses. Make sure your government is performing for you.
And where are you sealing the deals? Like you mentioned that this creates opportunity in places like Malta, anywhere in the world. Where are you looking at
It's kind of the rise of the small country.
Are you looking in Tel Aviv and Mumbai and Beijing? Are you still looking here in the Valley? Where are you finding the most interesting deals?
You know, I was the first Silicon Valley venture capitalist to invest in China. And I'm now the first Silicon Valley venture capitalist to get out of China because it's the black hole of investment now. You can't get your money out.
Yeah.
The Chinese can't get their money out. We can't get our money out. He's clamped down on currency and everything else, made it really rough on all those really dynamic people. But where am I looking? The U.S. is still a wonderful place to invest. I think some combination of Eastern and Western Europe might have a rise. You know, I've seen Europe go through 3 stages in my life. They ruled the world, and then the next generation was kind of this wine and cheese generation. And then now we've got these entrepreneurs coming up, these young entrepreneurs who are saying, hey, wait, we don't rule the world? You know, hey, let's go do something. Let's go back and, rule the world again. I put a little into Africa, but that's always hit and miss. And I'll probably put quite a bit into Southeast Asia. I've found that there were these 2 companies. There's one in Africa called Branch and one in Southeast Asia called Yuangtamen. They have the exact same business model. It is peer-to-peer lending. And they're building sort of a credit following. And the one in Africa had a 60% default rate on their first loans. They make them very small loans, so it still works. And the one in Southeast Asia had a 2% default rate. And I thought, well, God, what are you guys doing differently? And it turns out the one in Southeast Asia, if you fail to make your payment, you take down all the people around you. They're all vouching for each other. And so it's a whole different feeling than I'm taking this money and I may or may not pay it back. And so it's good to actually be a global venture capitalist because you get a chance to see those differences.
What's your favorite deal you have in your pipeline or you've invested in recently?
In my pipeline? You know what, I'm going to dodge that a little because it's like saying, who's your favorite child?
Come on.
But what I'm really excited about is all of the interesting things that are happening that are decentralizing the world. So things that permeate borders so that we're all completely directly connected. And I think that is going to make for a much more peaceful, loving, exciting, dynamic, and prosperous world because we're all going to be interconnected. And we were interconnected by the internet. It made a big impact.
Right.
The idea that our politicians are kind of having trade wars and all that stuff, we're starting to look at them and say, well, I guess by selling fear, you're staying in business because we've got no issue with the Chinese and what they're doing. And we have no issue with, the people of any of the countries of the world. We might have issues with the politicians trying to hold on to their power in various countries. I think this is, people are smarter than that. They, just because the press tells you to fear something doesn't mean you have to go fear it. They are, people, this is a little weird, but I've met people in the State Department. They're always talking about where we have tension. We got tension in this country, tension in this country. Go visit those countries with all that tension. You will find that there is no tension there. It might be a little tension between leaders, or they call themselves leaders. You guys are the leaders. There may be tension between politicians because they need that to justify their position, because we're starting to think, wait a second, with smart contracts, artificial intelligence, perfect ledgers, the blockchain, Bitcoin, we're starting to see that, wait a second, lots of those things that government employees are doing now can be just done by computer. And we're in this very weird situation, and those government employees have power over the population, but the population is starting to look at them and say, wait, what do you really do? Why are you even doing that? You know, you've got a 1960s computer in front of you, and what exactly do you do?
Right.
You know,
Now,
how are you providing progress?
we have a lot of folks here from overseas, right? And they may not be aware of some of your recent, more controversial initiatives. So you put a chunk of money in to get a position on the ballot for the breakup of California. I understand you had, what, 700,000 signatures to put that on the ballot? Is that right?
The first time we did it was for 6 Californias, and the second time was for 3. The first time we did get all the signatures, but
and it's going to the ballot, right?
No.
No.
They
okay.
coerced the people who count those signatures to make sure that they would decrease the number that were good signatures, so that we didn't get it on the ballot the first time.
Well, we have a fair and even political system here. What are you talking about?
Hang on. Second time, so I was thinking, okay, well, we'll double the amount this time. So I doubled the number. So there was no way they could do that to me again. I doubled the number when we went to 3 Californias, which turned out to poll a little better.
Hanging chads?
And no, what they did, somehow they coerced they work here, the California Supreme Court, to yank it off the ballot the day before the ballots were printed, and I got no subpoena, I got nothing. They just yanked it right off the ballot, so you don't get to vote on it. Now, the idea behind it was, I started to think, I said, God, why does California provide the worst service? You know, education is 47th, the infrastructure's falling apart, potholes everywhere. The prisons are 4 times as populated as they were maybe 50 years ago. We have quality of life where we used to have #1 quality of life. We're now 50th out of 50. Place to do business, we're now 50th out of 50. I was thinking, well, wait a second. When a company provides the worst service at the highest cost, what is that? It's a monopoly or an oligopoly. It gives us no choice. We're stuck here. We love the weather, so we don't want to move. So we're stuck here. And so I thought, well, how do you compete with that? Well, I'm a venture capitalist, so I look for startups that can compete with that. So I looked, and I thought, okay, we'll take 1 or 2 counties and we'll create a little state and see how it'll grow. And then I thought, oh boy, that wouldn't be fair to the rest of the state. So I thought, well, okay, break it into 6. That was the original thinking. And then I thought, well, let's break it into 3 so that the 3 states would have to compete for you. They would have to be accountable to you. And that was my thinking, and I wanted to make all the states, in effect, pretty even. So demographically, they were all pretty even. They each had a coastal city. They each had, a combination of farm and city. And we cut it according to, we looked at all sorts of things, where the water flows, the police, a whole bunch of different issues. And we came up with this. And our polling started at 8% in favor, and then it went to 12% in favor, and then it went to 17% in favor. And then it was 27% in favor with 35% undecided And I think it made the unions panic, and they ripped it right off the ballot. And, or they got the Supreme Court to rip it off the ballot.
So do you come back for phase two?
So much for, well, it's probably still the same Supreme Court and the same unions. I think I have to get more creative.
Fair enough. But interesting concept, right? Government really as a service. And things that
Yeah, well, and that's part of my thinking. And I got this thinking when the Prime Minister of Estonia came to Draper University. Oh, I started a school for entrepreneurs, and it's really an interesting school. We also have, and I would be remiss to offer this.
Please tell us about the HERO program.
Yeah, I'd be remiss not to offer this to you. We have a regular HERO program. It's 5 weeks. It's for any student who is thinking, hey, I might want to start a business. And we have been transformative. It's been unbelievable. We have an NPS score of 9.7 out of 10.
Wow.
And we've had about 1,000 students. They've come from 77 different countries, started 350 companies. They've sent me about 3,000 business plans. But they've become, and we take them through survival training with Navy SEALs and Special Forces. We get a Tony Robbins acolyte to come in and tell them how great they can be, and what are you now, what do you want to be, and let's map those things. And they do some of those things. It's a very different kind of school. It's all team-based. It's very interesting. But we also have executive 1-week programs, so you guys may want to take your top executive teams and get them there for those programs. They have been quite interesting and very successful also.
Maybe we should do next year's YPO program and align it with Draper University.
Oh, that'd be a great idea.
Be a lot of fun.
That'd be a great idea. You
So,
guys would get to know each other really, really well. Anyway, where were we before I got
Overly
off
understanding
the track?
Draper. No, I did want to catch Draper University in that piece. And we actually have some startups coming in that are highlighting their pieces of the future of work and the future of health, medicine, longevity for tomorrow. What's your advice to those startups? I think we have a few of them here today. As they're scrabbling like we all do in the startup to make it going, what are you seeing today that's making the successful ventures work?
So you mentioned longevity and healthcare. I've got this new view. Oh, wait. Sorry, the reason I thought about governments competing with each other was because the Estonian Prime Minister came to Draper University and he said, first he said, just by instituting digital signatures, we saved 2% of the GDP. And then digital voting got all the young people to vote, and the digital identity lowered the crime rate, increased the business climate. Then he gave me a card, and it's in here. And he made me the 3rd virtual resident of Estonia. And I said, well, what can I do with this? And he said, oh, yeah, you can set up a business, open a bank account, buy real estate, all without setting foot in Estonia. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. There is a virtual layer of service that a government provides that doesn't have to be tied to a land mass, doesn't have to be tied to borders. And now the Malaysian government is doing the same thing, and the Kazakhstan government is talking about virtual citizenship. This could end up being really interesting because governments now don't have to be tied to a landmass, and they have to start thinking like you guys do. They have to serve their customer. It's a major breakthrough in the way they're thinking. And so I think that's going to be a big deal. Now, you asked about healthcare, so I'll do that.
Well, just keeping on that topic, it's interesting to think that governments are now freed from their geographic barriers, much like companies are, so that they can attract and entertain talent around the world, creates a deeper taxable base. It's kind of a provocative thought.
And it's pretty interesting. I mean, Malta's seeing it. A lot of these smaller countries, Liechtenstein, Malta, Switzerland, Japan. Japan decided that when China said Bitcoin's illegal, Japan decided that they would make Bitcoin a national currency. They did. They made it a national currency. You see in the storefronts, in yen and in Bitcoin. You see you can pay in yen or in Bitcoin for whatever the goods are. They've in effect said, we are open for business. We are competing, and we're willing to be the ones who take this small risk to attract those dynamic people that we're looking for.
And maybe they'll be tomorrow's winners. So we have about 2-3 minutes to wrap up. What else do you think we should have as a takeaway when we think about the future of work, the fourth industrial revolution, and where things are going? If you're running a traditional business, whether it's a car dealership in Iowa or a scrap metal business in Brazil, what should people have on their radar so they're not out-invented, steamrolled by some new technology, or just killed by upstarts?
I would use AI. I mean, I would definitely use AI. Healthcare is going to be completely new, so I want to get into healthcare. You're going to put all your data, your medical records up in the cloud. Everybody else is too. We're going to be able to analyze all that and try to get you better results. But your results won't just be tied to your medical records. They're going to be tied to your genetic history and your blood test results. And beyond that, your Fitbit results, what you had for breakfast, who you've met, what you've done, where you've traveled, all these things are up there in the cloud somewhere. As more and more of this data starts appearing, when you're sick, the best diagnosis is going to be up there in the cloud. And so the doctor will use that as a tool and will have much better diagnosis. We have a company called CloudMedics that does just that, and they took the doctor test, and the average doctor gets a 76. They got an 86, and when combined with a doctor, they got a 91. So I think we're going to get better outcomes. So I've thought about this too for venture capital. How would I do AI for venture capital? Well, I'd plug in a bunch of the questions, and then I'd use the cameras to determine passion and drive, and then are they lying? All that stuff. And then I can go do other things. It can take me to another level.
Could be great.
So I think the future is very bright. The future is completely decentralized. The geographic borders are going to open up. My guess is that my kids, grandkids will look at them and say, what are those booths? And they'll say, oh, that was called customs. That was when you went from one geographic territory to another. You had to go through this system to make sure that you were safe to go across the other border. And the grandchildren will say, well, that was stupid.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Great to see you.
Great coming. Thank you.